So, what is the Japanese method? Alright, you're probably asking, who is this guy? He doesn't look Japanese. And to that I say, that's racist. Because maybe I am. I'm not. But I did work at 3 sushi restaurants. And I was taught the Japanese way. And so, with that, I'm going to teach you guys how to do it that way, everything you need to do it, and how you can do it on your first try. Get started. So the Japanese method is the way most sushi chefs break down a fish. It's in the 3 parts, the 2 fillets and the center skeleton. The goal is to minimize the amount of flesh lost and minimize damage to the flesh. This is preserving its texture and flavor as much as possible. What you need is a knife, a very sharp knife. Like I said, you want to minimize damage to the flesh, so no dull, blunt kitchen knife that can barely cut a tomato.
Dull.
As for which kind of knife, I was taught with a deba, which is the traditional Japanese knife used to fillet and break down fish. But you can also use any thin, flexible knife. Only problem I could see occurring is when cutting off the head. I actually chipped one of my knives doing this, cutting the head incorrectly. So be careful with that, and I'll show you a way to avoid that. And if you're wondering if it has to be a red snapper, no, this method will work for most fish. Flatfish are the exception. That's a whole different breakdown. You have to watch a whole different video on that.
The name's Flounder.
And this method can be used for salmon and trout, but those fish, there's a different technique that's simpler and faster. And if you want a video on that, I can do that. So before anything, we're gonna dry off the fish. You can take some paper towels and make sure it's dry on the outside, inside. This will prevent any slipping and give you something to hold on to. And once you have that, we're on to step 1. Assuming you bought your fish scaled and with the guts removed, first thing we're gonna do is remove the head. The head and collar kind of has an outline around it for you to follow. You're gonna just trace that. You're gonna take your knife and just go around. If your knife is sharp, it should just cut really smoothly. The key is long strokes, no sawing. That'll damage the flesh. Once you have the first side loose, you're gonna flip it over and do the same thing on the other side, following the line of the collar and head. And when you do that, you're gonna try to meet up at the top at the same spot. If it's tough getting through the skin, they probably didn't do a good job scaling it, and just make sure to wipe your knife off. It's not super important for an at-home setting, but if you were at a restaurant, you would want to make sure it's as clean as possible. Alright, now we just have to separate the head from the rest. If you have a thick deba or a butcher's knife, you don't really have to be careful where you cut. You just slam through it like I did. If you have a thinner knife and have trouble going through, move the blade left or right and try to get in between the vertebrae. Now we're going to start separating the lower flesh from the lower vertebrae. Place your hand on top of the fish to firmly hold it in place, and we're just going to follow this line. When I was taught, my chef would say, just use the tip of the knife and just cut the skin. Then with each stroke, you're going to go slightly deeper, and you want your blade to have slight downward pressure, so you stay as close to the bones and leave as little meat behind. If you go too hard, you're going to break through the bones onto the other side. And I'll show you what happens later and how to fix that. And you're going to just do long strokes all the way to the center, all the way to the spine. And once you reach the center spine, you're going to stop. And you're going to flip your fish over to the other side. I know this is a little weird, but this is how I was taught. Alright, we're going to do the same thing here. We're going to follow that line. We're going to separate the top flesh from the vertebrae. And you're just going to cut the skin first. With each stroke, you're going to cut closer and closer to the spine. Remember when I said not too hard or you cut through the bones? Well, this is what it looks like. And I definitely did this on purpose to show you guys what happens. Now, if I were at work, I'd be sweating a little. But we're at home. We bought this fish. There's no pressure to be perfect. Just take your time and relax. This is just for you. If this happens, you're just gonna lift up the fish a little to see where it is. You're just gonna take your knife and go up and over the bones. And then just continue like normal, all the way to the spine. Once you're there, you're gonna stop and you're gonna flip the fish over again. And just stay with me, this is gonna make sense later. Same thing on this side, just the opposite direction. Follow the line, cut the skin all the way to the spine. If you have a friend or a partner, this will be a fun activity. You can see who did the best at the end and make fun of the loser. Or you guys can just be supportive or whatever. Once you're at the spine stop, we're not flipping it. We're going to separate this whole fillet from the spine. You're going to run your knife up along the spine toward the head, separating any flesh still attached. Now we're going to have to break through these ribs. This can be done two ways. I'll show you the cool way first. Then on the other side, I'll show you how to do it with the shears. I'm going to run my knife up along the spine up until I reach the ribs. With my left hand, I'm going to hold onto the fillet firmly, but not too tight that it'll damage the meat. And then with one swift motion, slice through. Key things here. Be careful you aren't aiming your knife in a way that it'll cut the flesh of the fish. Also, don't squeeze too hard on the fillet. If you're having trouble getting a grip on the fillet, grab a piece of paper towel and hold it with that. We're back to flipping, but you're gonna put it back basically the same way you had it at first. And we're gonna separate the bottom flesh from the bottom vertebrae on the other side. Same as before, it's just opposite. Some might find this part easier than the first, and some might find it awkward because you're cutting up instead of down. But it's all the same, long strokes all the way to the spine. Then, like before, separate the remaining flesh attached to the spine, running up your knife up toward the head, and stop at the ribs. Now, with the kitchen shears, it's pretty self-explanatory. You just cut those ribs and separate the fillet. The only thing, be careful where your shears are. Like smaller kitchen shears would really help at this point. With these big ones, I almost stabbed my other fillet. And there you have it, 2 perfectly separated fillets in 3 pieces like I promised. Last thing we need to do is just remove the part of the ribs that's still remaining on those fillets. And this part is really easy. The ribs are still attached with small pin bones, and so first you need to break those. And then long strokes, you're gonna try to stay as close to the bones as possible. And then once you get down to the bottom, you're gonna just cut it off. And the same thing for the other one. I'm struggling here because there's a bunch of scales on the other side. And you're done. 2 beautiful fillets on your first try. So that, guys, is a detailed tutorial on how you can fillet a fish on your first try. And if you like this video and want a tutorial on something else, leave a comment down below and see what I can do. And if you want an easy, high protein breakfast, check out my protein waffle recipe. I appreciate you for watching. Thank you.